All right, let me just see if I've got this up and running now. Yep. Just gonna send out a quick tweet. Okay. All right, so I'm going to get started on this now. I guess the first order of business is to go over this thing that we built last time. So last time I sort of stopped halfway through because I got stuck on this little CSS bug, but I went back and finished it afterwards. So I finished this Be Right Back page. So the way this works is I can enter some time limit and I can say what we're going to be working on. So I'm going to say like, today we're building, or we're doing some T3 and web audio stuff. Then I hit start and it'll boot up a random background color. In this case it chose gray, which was pretty close to the white that was already there. And then it starts a little timer for us. And this is just an infinite scrolling animation, this Be Right Back. Might be a little fast right now. Maybe this is like slightly seizure inducing. But I can show you guys a little bit about how I fixed that bug, or how I got here. So the real problem was the positioning of all these elements, because this has two layers to it. So this is kind of hard to read the markup here a little bit, but the way this works is that there's basically a top and bottom layer to the text. So you see there's all these divs up here. These are all the bottom layers technically, which are the black text in the background right now. And then there's this div called box, and that is this this black box right here in the middle of the screen. And inside of that we have the same, basically the same markup, which is repeated above. But this markup has a class on it of front, which means that it will be white whenever it's inside the container. And then this box just has overflow hidden set on it, so you can't see this white text when it's outside of the box, but actually it's still there, it's just hidden. So that's sort of the way the markup works. But the reason this was I was having trouble with this last time is that I was trying to align these, behind and in front text elements, because all these letters need to be perfectly aligned. Otherwise, if they're misaligned, they'll look weird, because when the letter enters here, it won't match up with the line. So the main problem there was that I didn't have position relative on my body element. So basically, adding this essentially fixed it. And then I cleaned up my code a little bit. I actually don't need this flex wrapper anymore. That's redundant right now. I also don't need this class anymore. So yeah, but I just cleaned this up a little bit. I consolidated some of the text styles. This is just like the font weight, the font size. We have vertical writing mode so that the text goes up and down rather than left and right. Letter spacing, that's just because to get the text to be spaced evenly, and some other little things on here. And then I have a little centered class, which just centers things vertically in the screen. So it puts the top at 50% and puts them absolutely positioned. So like this box, for example, is centered, and then actually all of these elements are centered too, these text elements, and that just helps to align them all. And then each one of these text rows has a row class on it. And this is to position them to the left and the right. So these are all absolutely positioned, so I give it a left or a right percentage, and this is just how I space out these rows. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. This is just some boilerplate stuff. This is just messing with the Z indexes to make sure all this stuff looks proper and correct. And then this is this animation here. So this is the scroll up and scroll down. You know, some of these are scrolling up, some of these are going down. And so this is just an infinite animation. And what it does is just translates these things in the Y direction. And so it just moves, for example, this element, it just translates it upwards. And the animation down, you can see it goes from -80 to -30. So it's just translating it downwards. And it does take a little bit of positioning. You have to kind of adjust the markup, so how many letters you have in here versus how far you do this transition. So from -80 to -30, you could also do like 90-20. You know, you can kind of play around with this to adjust the speed and everything. But you do have to be kind of careful, because if you don't adjust it properly, you can get some jumping. So you can get the point where it kind of gets to the end and then it jumps back to the beginning. So you do have to kind of just play around with that and tweak it a little bit to get it right. Where it kind of gets to the end and then it jumps. Okay. All right, so what we're going to do today is something totally different. So I'm going to pivot from this to this, which is going to be the page for basically when the stream is going to start. So it's also going to have a timer on it, but it's going to have a lot more elements. And the really key feature is it's going to have hopefully some animations that respond to audio that's playing. So I've set up this little audio player here. And I've got some code in here that will play some songs. And then what I'm going to show you guys is how I have sort of hooked that up to the web audio API. So a reminder, this is going to be the one that I'm sort of trying to build today. So this is what we designed beforehand. I probably will not finish this design today. I doubt. Maybe I'll get through this first element here. That's maybe a goal. So in this design, I have this thing as an ellipse, and what this is supposed to be is text around this ellipse, and then the ellipse will respond to the audio like a waveform visualization. But I'm probably going to change this up for the stream. I'm probably going to do this, instead of doing an ellipse, I'm probably going to do more like a circle, just because it's going to be easier to code. Because I started thinking about how I would code this for an ellipse, and there's actually a lot of things I kind of need to think about how I do, so I don't really want to figure that out today. So I'm going to start with a circle, and then I think if we get the circle working, then I might work on an ellipse, but that'll be maybe a project for later. So let's go through the code that I have right now for this page. So the markup is very simple. I just have this timer element, and I have the audio player right here. So this is this audio player. I have a canvas element, which I'll show you what that does in a second, and that's basically it. So my JavaScript here, I have, this is just the same thing we went over last time. This just sets up a new timer whenever I click the screen. And then I have a little bit of code up here that handles how I play the songs. So when I click the screen, it starts a new song. I can show that to you guys. So if I refresh this page and I click the screen, yeah, this audio starts playing here. And this is a visualization of the waveform of this audio. So this is sort of what we're going to try to build today, but with text and SVG, because this right now is a canvas element. And this player will kind of loop through a list of songs that I have. So, okay. All right, so let's see, what do I want to do right now? Okay, so the way that this works, I'll explain a little bit about the Web Audio API and how I set up this, this canvas visualization. So I'm not a master of this. I just started learning the Web Audio API like yesterday, so bear with me. But as far as I understand, basically you set up a new audio context, and this doesn't really do anything. This is just a context where you can dump a bunch of audio stuff. And then onto that audio context, we add a source for the audio. So in our case, the source is our player element. This is the audio player that we set up in our HTML. So whatever's playing through that player is going to be piped into the audio context. And then the way this kind of works is that you have these nodes. So you can create a new node on this by saying audio context.create analyzer, and that's an analyzer node, which is shockingly used to analyze things. And then you have to connect that node to your source so that whatever audio is being piped into your audio context is likewise going to be piped into your analyzer node. And then this part is very important, actually, I learned. You have to connect either your audio source or your analyzer node to your audio context.destination. So destination, this is like the end monitoring element. So the destination is like your headphones or your speakers. So I learned that if you don't include this destination, if you don't connect that to one of your nodes, you will not be able to hear anything that's playing on the page. So it basically mutes the page if you don't add that. And then what we're doing down here is capturing the data from that audio. So you set this analyzer.fft size. This is what this does is a fast Fourier transform on the audio data. This is a lot of stuff about audio data that I don't quite understand. But essentially, this is the number of samples that it takes. So this is how detailed your waveform will be. So and it has to be a power of 2. So if you make this 2 to the 5th, it'll be a lot like less detailed. You actually can't see it because it clips out of there because of the way that I have the visualization set up. But yeah, that's what that's for. And then this is the width and height of the audio player, buffer length. This is the number of points that we actually have that we're going to collect in our visualization. It ends up being half of the FFT size. And then what we do here is we make a new float32 array. This is just a special type of array in JavaScript. And this is where we're going to capture our data. So we make this array, and it's empty right now when we make it. And we make it the length of our buffer length. So this is how many points are going to be in this array. Then this is just creating the canvas element here, which is what actually makes that visualization. And then this function draws the audio data. So the key function here is this analyzer.getFloatTimeDomainData, which is a great name for a function. So this just tells the Web Audio API to actually grab the time domain data from this analyzer node, and then to add it to our waveform array, which is that empty array that we made up here. And then this is just how we draw this. So we clear the canvas and tell it begin path, and then we loop through the array that contains all of the data for the waveform, and we just basically draw a line. This is just a little bit of math here, which I'm not going to go through right now, but this basically just draws a line that represents the data in our audio data array. And then this part here is important. We call request animation frame at the bottom. This is a way to set up this function to run essentially as fast as the browser can do it. So this code is going to keep updating all the time, constantly. which is how this waveform keeps updating. So it looks like it's animating when you actually watch it, but it's really not. It's really drawing a static image, but it's drawing a static image every like 60 times per second or something. So you can actually see that if you so see, this looks like it's animating now, but you can see that it's not really animating if I take out this clear rect line here. So this clears the canvas every time this this function repeats. But if you don't clear the canvas, you can imagine what will happen is that these lines will just keep building up. See? So it's just drawing these static lines actually. So I already have that set up. I wanted to get that set up because I wanted to know that I could actually figure out how to capture this data, this audio data that's coming in. So now that I have that set up, what I'm going to try to do today is a couple things. So I'm going to try to turn this, this line here, I'm going to try to turn this into a circle. And then I'm going to try to put text on it, and hopefully the text will animate along that circle. So I have sort of my steps like plotted out here. So we need to generate points on a circle, and we need 1 point for every point in our waveform, our sound array. Because then what we're going to do is we're going to take that perfect circle and we're going to augment all the points by the magnitude of the audio input. So, this audio input is just a bunch of points along the line, and they each have a negative or positive height. And that is a value between 0 and 1. And so we're going to take those values and use them to make this line, this kind of squiggly line, but it's going to be on our circle. So what we're going to do is we're going to adjust the radius of the circle according to those values. And that's why we need to generate our points ourselves. That's why we can't just use like D3, like SVG circles, because those don't give you all the information about every point on the circle. And they don't necessarily use the number of points that are in our sound array, which is important. And then so we're just going to draw a path through that circle. And we're going to try to update the path anytime that our song data changes. So anytime that our audio data changes. So we're going to do the same request animation frame thing. We're going to hope that it is performant enough. We're going to hope that it can draw that SVG fast enough. Canvas is pretty powerful that way, but SVG is not always. So that might be an issue that I foresee, but hopefully it won't. And then we're going to take a bunch of text and link that to the SVG path and hope that it updates. So there's a method you can use to basically align text along an SVG path. So like here you have this text and you just tell it to be linked to this SVG path, and it will take care of that for you. I don't know if it'll update when the path updates, so I'm hoping it will. Fingers crossed. But if it doesn't, we might have to figure out a different solution. All right, so I guess I'm just gonna dive right in. The question is how to generate points on a circle. Well, let's see. We can get rid of this right now. I don't need this BRB page stuff here. What I do need is I need to go to my HTML and I need to make myself a no, I don't want to do that. I need to make myself a an SVG element. Does Emmet not have SVG? Okay, SVG. And I will just give that ID of text circle. So I'm going to make that SVG so that we can select it and do stuff with it in our JavaScript. And so the first thing is how to generate enough points around a circle. And then we're going to try to draw those points to the SVG. So to generate points on a circle, you generally do something like make an array of angles around the circle, and then for each angle, you say x is the radius times the cosine of the angle, and then y is the radius times the sine of the angle. Now, if I were doing this in R, it would be like, 30 seconds to make this. Since I'm going to try to do it in JavaScript, we'll see. I think I have some code that I might actually pull up to remind myself of this. So I'm going to open up another window here of this editor, and I actually have to pull this off to the side because this is like secret in progress code, but I want to pull this up to show you guys how I would do this in another app. Yeah. All right, so we're gonna try to do this in a loop. So let's call our array circle points. And that's just gonna be, right now, it's just gonna be an empty array. And then we're gonna say something like, for let I equals 0, semicolon, I is less than, now we want to make sure this is the number of points that we have in our waveform array. So we can say is less than waveform.length. And then I plus plus. And so what we're going to do for each of these points is come up with an angle. So let's say for each one of these, we want, actually we'll do that out here because we want this angle step to be sort of, we don't want this to be inside of the loop. So this is how much we're going to augment that, this is how much we're going to augment that angle each time it goes around the circle. So we'll say, that angle equals math. Let's see, we need 2 times math dot pi, because a circle is 2 pi around divided by waveform dot length. So that should be the correct angle every time we need to increment our points around here. All right, so then we're going to go back to our loop, and what we're going to do is for each one of these, we're gonna say, circle, oh, that's right, actually we do want circle points dot push, so we're gonna start adding stuff to this array. And each thing we add to this array is gonna be an object, because we're gonna need to have like a radius on this object, we're gonna need to have a, I don't know if we want to store the angle. Maybe we can store the angle, but we need to have an X and a Y point. So right now, the radius is just going to be, I'll just call this rad, and we'll just say it's a radius of, I don't know, we're working in SVG, so maybe it's a radius of, we have a pretty big canvas actually, maybe it's a radius of 300 or something. We'll change that later. And this is actually going to change. The way that we're calculating the radius is probably going to change. So we want to do this points.push, and we want to say let's see. So we're starting. We want to start at 0. Let me think about this for a sec. Actually, I might change the way that I do this. So instead of going I, because I want to go around in an angle, what I might say is I might actually say let A equals 0. And then we're going to say A is less than 2 times, we'll just put this in parentheses, 2 times math.pi. And then we will say A plus equals angle. So we're going to increment this this angle by the angle every time we go around the circle. So this is hopefully going to give us the right length of array. I might have to double check this if I'm doing it correctly. But let's just start storing stuff in our array right now. So let's say that x equals, or x, we're doing this like this, x is radius times math.cosine of our angle. And then our y is going to be radius times math.sine of that angle. And hopefully, yeah, this waveform array should be set up before this runs. So let's see if that did anything. Let's just console log circle points. All right, so this should be our array of circle points, and it's 512 in length, which I happen to know is the correct length. That may not always be the case, but I happen to know that it's the right length because I was working on this before, and I know that that waveform array is 512 points. So this looks, I don't know, I guess reasonable maybe. Who knows? I have to check if these are right. I'll have to draw them out and see if they're in the right spot. But so far, this doesn't look totally crazy. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's try to draw just the points to our SVG now and see if they are in the right spot. So for that, I'm going to use D3. So I'm going to go up and select my SVG element, and I'm going to go say like const SVG equals D3.select, and we called that thing something. We called that thing text circle. Okay. And then I'm also going to put a width and a height on that element. So I'm just going to say width, and we can set this as a constant later. Right now I'm just going to hard code it, and I'm going to say the width is 1000. And I'm also going to say the height is the same thing. Okay, and then what I'm going to do is go to my Let's see, I'm thinking, should I make a group for these or should I just add them right to the SVG? We'll just add them right to the SVG right now. So we'll just say svg.select all, and we'll call these, I don't know, circle dots. I'm very good with coming up with names. I'm gonna say .data, and our data here is circle points. And then we're gonna say .join. And these are all right now just going to be circle elements. And then the attribute, so we're gonna place those circle elements. So x is going to be, I'll give this an accessor function. It's going to be, it's called x, d.x. Y is going to be same thing, d.y. I can type. And then the radius of the points, I don't know, we'll give them a radius of 10 or something. Maybe that's too much, 5. And then we will give them fill of black. And we will see if that did anything. Don't know actually where our SVG is on the page. SVG is right here, and we don't see anything there. Okay, so what's happening? Well, the first thing to note is that the SVG is not the width and the height that we set it to. So that's probably because I need to do something like this. I need to say something like 1000 pixels maybe, and I need to say same thing here. Nope, that didn't do it either. Interesting. It's because this is all within our init function, I see. That, of course, makes sense, because I know that you don't actually need to put pixels on there. I thought that was weird, so yeah, okay. So the reason this didn't start is because, of course, as I forgot, all this stuff that I'm writing right now is inside this init function. And that doesn't run until you click the page. So I'm gonna have to click the page every time I want to see if something worked. Which is going to be fun, but... All right, so one thing we might want to do, because we can see our points are all up in the top right corner right now, so maybe we just want to make something like a group, and so we want to call that group G, so say svg.append, we'll append a group to it, and then we're going to say attribute transform. And we will translate that. Now this is the time where it's probably good to put this in a constant. And I know I'll put these things all up at the top and everything. I'm just really prototyping right now. Let's call this, we're just going to have this be a square the whole time. So we'll just have this, call this SVG dim 1000. So we're gonna translate this by the x and the y are gonna be that SVG dim divided by 2. So I'm gonna use a template literal here if I can type, and I'm gonna say SVG dim divided by 2, comma SVG dim divided by 2. So hopefully what the point of this is that this is going to move this group to the center of our SVG canvas, because when you draw things in SVG, they by default draw to the top left of the canvas. Well, now we've royally screwed it up, because now what we've done is we forgot that we actually want to append this to our group, not to our SVG. Oh no, something terrible. Oh, cannot read property attribute of null. Line 99, okay. Oh, okay, yes, we should probably do that thing that we meant to do, but then we got lazy and stopped typing. All right, so what I'm seeing here is that this is our SVG, and it's drawing all of our points right in the center of the canvas is what it looks like. How unusual. So we can look at that if we want. So we can go to our SVG and we can look at our little group here, and we can see that it has all of these circles. And the reason that it's drawing them all there is because I named the attribute wrong, which is something I do 9 times out of 10. So SVG attributes are called CX and CY. And there we go. Okay. So this is our beautiful circle. It's made up of lots of little points, and you can't really see that right now because all of them are overlapping, but if we make these points really tiny, maybe you can see it, sort of. Probably also have to make the radius of this whole thing bigger, but maybe you can kind of see if you zoom in there that this is all made up of little points all the way around. Okay. So that was fun. We drew a circle. That was successful, actually. All right. Well, that was sort of our first thing that we had to do. Draw a circle with the points, the number of points of the waveform array. Now, did I actually put that under? Yeah, okay, I did put that under the correct place. So augment the points by the magnitude of the audio input. So I will show you guys what that means. Let me go up to where I'm doing this whole waveform business, and I'm going to just console log the waveform. This is going to print a ton of crap to the console. So see, this is all of the float arrays. Okay, there we go. So now see, you have 0, 0, 0, everything is 0 here. That's because it's the audio is paused. So I paused the audio, so there's no track going. So there's actually just zeros, because 0 means no sound. But then you can see here where we had sound playing, we have all of these values. And like I said, the length of this array is 512. And let's see, did I choose the wrong array, or is it just showing me zeros because that was what was in the initial point? Huh. That might be some weird floating point math thing. But we can see that this array actually does have elements in it. Even though it claims to be 0 here, they are not all zeros. That might be because it's still drawing, actually. And so it's overwriting this, and that's probably what's happening, is it's not really showing me the values here. But when you actually do this and you have sound, there's all these arrays. You can see most of them are pretty small decimals. They're all between -1 and 1. And so we're going to use those values to try to distort our circle a little bit. So what I need to do is go in here and find where I drew the circle. Now this is where I said we're going to need to augment the radius. It's not always actually going to be 300. So that's a good sort of like 300 can be like our starting point, but then what we're going to want to do is every time that we make one of these points, we're going to want to check what the point is in the float array at that time, the corresponding point, and then augment our points to match that. And when I say augment, I don't know exactly how I'm going to do that yet. It might be some kind of like multiplication, but we're probably going to have to like think about the math a little bit to figure it out so that it doesn't have like super crazy deviations, so that it kind of stays, you know, within an appropriate range. So actually, I'm going to make the text here a little bit bigger on my editor, I think. Okay, that's easier to see. Easier for you guys to see, at least. I can see it fine. Okay, so let me think about how to do this a little bit. So we might want to also track the index now, because we're going to need to get the same index. So we can say something like, let's see, let's just call this like circle index equals 0. And then we want to increment that every time that we do this. So we want to increment that at the end. Circle index plus plus, and this way we can keep track of it. So we can say something like sound value is waveform circle index, and I just want 2 pluses, not 3. Now we're going to have to put all of this stuff probably inside of a draw function along with the waveform data. So it might be time now to say goodbye to our canvas. And I'm not going to get rid of it for good. I'm just going to comment this out. I'm going to just kind of consolidate this stuff. And I'm going to comment that all out. So now what this is doing is just every time it loops with request animation frame, it's grabbing the latest waveform data and updating that array. And what we want to say now is that every time this thing runs, we want to run all of our code here. And I think really all we want to do is probably regenerate this data. We don't want to redraw the SVG because hopefully the SVG should just update with our join here. We'll see if that works. I don't know. I'm just gonna get rid of that and put that up here. So let's put all of this inside of our draw waveform function, and let's just save that so that it doesn't get mad at us. Okay, so let me make sure I'm doing this right and nothing is going to crash on me. Circle points, angle, that's fine. And some of these things we can probably set outside of the draw waveform function. You know, not all those things, like the radius we can probably set out there, the angle we can set out there, stuff like that. But I'll just keep it here for now and see how this works. So what I want to do now, so for each one of these, I should have the value of the waveform at the time that I want it. So I want to do some sort of augmenting of my radius by that amount. So one way to do that would just be to, I'm trying to think about the scale of what I want to do this. I'm going to multiply this radius. What I'm going to do is multiply this radius by like the sound value. But I'm trying to think about how to scale that sound value maybe, because I still want to make sure that it's not going to go too crazy. You know, if I multiply the radius by like, well, like 0.0001, I don't want it to just go insane. The other issue is that these sound values are positive and negative. So the way that it stands right now, if you multiply that radius by a negative amount, it's going to give you a negative radius, which is kind of weird. We don't really want to do that. What I really want to do is subtract something from the radius or add something to the radius. So let me like before I do this and it just ends up totally crazy and it's going to be weird. Let me think a little more like thoughtfully about how to do that. So the sound value is between -1 and 1. What we want to do is come up with an amount to add or subtract from the radius that doesn't go too far out of bounds. So since this is between -1 and 1, we can use that to kind of scale our like some sort of incrementer here that we're going to use, or not really incrementer, but the amount that we're going to add or subtract. So, and it's -1, so if we just add it, it'll work. So what I'm thinking is something like this. We have const, this is like augment value, and it's going to be the sound, like our radius is 300, so let's say maybe we want to have like a deviation of up to like 100, and then we'll just multiply it by the sound value. And we could probably put this all in one line and just make it one thing, and I'll probably do that later, but for right now we'll just do it this way. And then what we want to do is say radius plus the augment value. So that's probably, I think this is the way that I want to do it. Plus augment value. Okay. Now I don't know if I have actually made it so that these points will animate, but what I do want to do is console log, every time this runs in this animation loop, I want to console log these circle points. I'm going to get rid of this console log down here. And that way I'll be able to see at least if it's changing. Even if my SVG doesn't animate necessarily, I'll be able to see if my points are changing. Let's see, I have some issue because the sound is not playing, which means I've probably made a syntax error somewhere, but I can't see it, so let's get rid of this. Circle points is not defined, line 113. Interesting, okay. Oh, yes, okay, of course. So this is not running because it can't necessarily access this data in here. So why don't I put this data, why don't I put this circle points array outside of this function? See if it likes that better. Okay. So I can see already it's not animating the points, but let me add in that console log again and see if it is at least like changing the points values. Okay. So the issue I can see already is that we are just adding to this array, because the problem is, this is the reason I had it defined inside of here, is that every time this animation loop runs, I want to replace or update rather those values, and see, like right here, we're just pushing values to there. So it's actually just adding values to that. So let me think about this a little bit. One thing I could try, there's better ways to do this, but I'm kind of like, I really just want to know if this works right now. So what I'm going to do is something that I think is going to be a bad idea, but I'm just going to do it. So I'm going to move this code up a little bit. I just like having my code in order, like that it's going to run. It's an R holdover that I just like. So I'm going to put my draw code actually inside of this animation loop. And like I said, this is probably a very bad idea. I probably shouldn't do this, but I just want to see if it works. Oh, okay, it kind of works. So it's not necessarily updating our points, but it's just drawing new points every time. Let me add back in that console log and see exactly what's happening here. I think I might still be drawing the points. Okay, it is updating now. So I'm just trying to inspect these arrays to see if I can figure out if they are changing at all. Okay, so this one has 296 and 0. This one has 304 and 0. Okay, so it is changing definitely. I mean, I guess I knew that from looking at this point. The question is, can I get it to update rather than having it redraw the points every time? So what I'm thinking about is I have this join in here, and I was hoping that just having join sort of has enter, you know, so I've been looking at some observable notebooks, so I can go to observable and sign in. So let's see, I want to go to the place where they're actually doing something that updates. So see, this is what I'm confused about right here, is that in this example, they're generating some random data every time this thing ticks, which is happening like, looks like every 2 seconds or something. Every time this thing ticks, it is updating the data with new random data. And all they're doing is saying .join text and, you know, just simple stuff. They don't have any explicit updates specified, and the text, it's handling the enter, exit, update all by itself. So maybe I have to go down. Maybe it's there's a little bit more to this than I thought, and I have to look at what this random function is actually returning. So one thing I can do is I can also just call random data and see what that gives me. It's just giving me an array of 10 numbers. I mean, so I'm trying to look here now and see if when something updates, like here we have a lot of numbers. And when it updates, it's definitely removing the elements. Oops, that was a misclick, sorry. Don't want to open R. But in our case, when we are updating this, it's not removing any of the previous elements. And I'm wondering, maybe it's because I have this inside of the draw loop. Because every time I'm doing that, I'm actually drawing this again instead of just updating the data. That's probably the answer. Because like I said, when I said it was a bad idea to put this here, I was probably correct in saying that. So yeah, this should really be outside of our draw loop, basically. But then we need to figure out a solution to update this array instead of pushing to this array constantly. So let me think about how to do that. There's probably a very smart way to do this, and you know, I should figure that out later. But for right now, what I might just do is this like very stupid solution where I'm just gonna go through and remove all the points in the array before I refill it. So let me think about that. So I can say something like circle points dot slice, and we're going to start from 0 to circle points dot length. So hopefully that should remove all the points in the array. We'll see if that works. I can see it's not working. I still got an error. I probably wrote my slice wrong. I have to look up probably how to use slice. I always forget the syntax for slice. But let me just comment out this console log so I can see if that was the error. That's not the error. Okay. Interesting. So I'm also just gonna turn the volume on Chrome down so you guys don't have to listen to that constantly. So interesting. Why is it not removing the points from that array? Oh, it's because it's splice, not not slice. That's the answer. I could also just set the length prop to 0. That's a good idea. Should probably just do that. Let's try that. Equals 0. Alright, well, now we need to go back and console log this to see exactly what's happening. Now we're getting the initial draw, but we're not getting any updates again, which is too bad. So this array is changing. Definitely this array is changing. Actually, is it changing? Interesting. Or am I just getting duped right now by the draw loop thing? Let me just try refreshing this again and looking at this one more time. I will just turn this down, but now I can look at this. Okay, so this is showing like 299, 0. The thing I'm wondering is, it doesn't look like this is actually getting augmented all that much. And I wonder if that's just because these are really close to each other. Yeah, see, I feel like if we go down all the way to the end of our console log here and like look at one of these, let's look at a recent one. Well, it is changing. The thing I'm wondering is, am I just not able to see that it's changing, or is it actually not changing? So one way we can do that is, instead of saying 100 times this, we can say 1000 times this. And hopefully that should definitely be visible if it is changing. Okay. Looks like it's not changing. Let's look at these values again. This is very strange. So this is 230 now. Let's look at one down here. 93. Okay, so this is absolutely changing, but our circle isn't redrawing. Very strange. If I put this back in the draw loop, it definitely will change. But we're going to have the same problem we had before, where it's not clearing. It is fun to watch, though. I could just do a stream where I sit here and just let this play until the browser chokes and crashes because too many points on the screen. So the question is, what is the proper way to get this thing to detect that there was an update in the data, and why is it not detecting that? So if we go back to the observable notebook, all they're doing is selecting the data and saying data equals random data. Well, in that case, they are actually rerunning the draw loop every time. Let's look at some other examples. Simple join with transitions. Okay. Sometimes the problem with observable is that there's a little bit of weirdness with the way that enters and updates and things actually work on observable. So let's read a little bit about what this actually does. I never use updates, actually. I very rarely use updates, so this is why I'm struggling with this. So if the joining selection isn't empty, as on subsequent iterations of the loop above, selection.join appends entering elements and removes exiting elements to match the data. Entering and updating elements are merged and ordered, allowing chained operations to result. So I feel like then in that case, I really should have the this in the draw loop. But the question is, why is it entering new data every time instead of actually appending it? Or rather, instead of updating it. So let's see. I see, interesting. All right, well, let's try getting a little bit fancier with this here. .data random letters DD. I wonder what random letters returns. I'm just curious. It just returns an array, so I wonder if that's actually important. Try a couple things here. First, let's try this, which seems very unlikely to work. Close that. Nope. Didn't hurt anything for sure though, so we could leave it there. This is very mesmerizing to watch, sorry. Okay, so that didn't work. So the next thing to try is to get a little bit fancier with the way that we're writing our join code, because right now we're just writing join and hoping that it just does everything for us. Instead of doing that, let's write it the way that it is written here. So let's write enter, and we're going to give it a function to do when stuff enters. So we will say enter.append circle, and then we'll say .attribute fill, will be black, and that's fine. And then we'll say update.attribute, and we'll say fill, and we'll let the fill be red. And then we'll get rid of this fill down here. I'll be really surprised if that actually works. No, doesn't look like that's working. Well, at least we're getting it to draw a bunch of stuff. And this is also kind of like a cool generative pattern. I might use that idea as an idea for some kind of generative artwork as well. But for right now, it's definitely not what we want. So at this point, I am fresh out of ideas. So let me stare at this for a little bit longer and see if I can think of anything. Now that this is in the draw loop, I might just bring this back in here. This might also be, I mean, it's unlikely, but it's possible this is part of the issue, is that I'm actually creating a new array basically every time I'm doing this. Yeah, every time this is drawing, I mean, I guess this is... Yeah, I can see some issues here. I can see a potential issue here, which it might be why it is not updating properly or exiting properly. And that's that I am actually like making a new array every time I do this. Every time this draw loop runs, it's basically making a new array. Although that's, yeah. It's really the same thing that's happening in the case of this. So I don't know why that would be different in our case. I don't think this is necessary either. I don't really know what this does, but I don't think it's necessary in this case. Now I'm just trying to let this run for a little while because I'm thinking, and I like watching this pattern appear on the screen. I'm really enjoying this pattern. Oh boy. Alright, what I might do in the meantime, because I am clearly failing at figuring out updates, is to just go back and work on some other parts of this. So I might deal with this later, but I will try to figure out that join problem after stream, and then maybe next time we can work on putting the text on the path and see if that works. But something I can also do, there's a few things I can do to sort of update this starting screen that we have here. So the first thing is I have it clicking right now. I want to change that to be a little bit more like the be right back screen. So the be right back screen, I'm going to open that up now, just so I have these things open. I'm going to copy some of this over there. So We want to have this form and this button that says start. So I'm going to copy this over to my starting HTML, and I will actually replace this with that. Then I'm going to copy over the CSS that I have in here as well. So somewhere in here, let's see, timer, header, that. I don't need this grid wrapper anymore. Actually, that can go away. Okay, here we go, inputs and button. So we're just going to copy this over to our CSS here to center these things. Okay, so now they're in the center. And what else do we want to do? We want to implement that code to make the background a random color. So I'm going to copy some of that over as well. First, what I'll do, I also want to copy over this stuff to make the button work. So let's see, I have a JavaScript file here. Let's go up there. Project input, button, minutes input, we got all that stuff. Also going to need to copy over the root element because the root is where we're going to put our CSS variables that we're going to animate. We're definitely going to need those. Let's see, text color, dark text, that's all good. Let's add that. And we will also copy over this event listener on the button that initiates everything. Okay, and I'm going to comment this out. And let's see, what else do we need here? We need to put this minutes value inside of our init function. And then we need, let's see, this is all good, that times minutes. And actually, I might, get rid of that minutes just for the time being, and I might also actually switch this back. So I'm going to leave this button and all this stuff here, but just for the purpose of debugging, it's kind of nice to just be able to click on the body and just have everything ready to go. So that's why I might do that. But now I want to get that code in here to shuffle the background color to a random color whenever we do our updates. So the first thing we're going to need to do that is we're going to need all this these CSS variables in the root of our CSS. So we'll put this up here. Say root, background color, text color, body font, and the background color is what we're going to change. And then we probably need to add something like on the body. Yep. So here we're setting our text color to the text color and our background color to the background color on the body. And then in here somewhere I have some code, here we go, that sets the background. So we will also put this inside of our init function, and we'll put that right after the timer. Okay, now the init function should run here still. Everything should be fine here. I don't really need any of this button stuff or the inputs right now because I can just hook that up later when I'm ready to. For the time being, I'll just let myself keep clicking on the body. So colors is not defined. Ah, yes, that makes sense. So I have an array of colors which I'm using to draw that random background color, but it's in a module and I haven't imported that module to this yet. So to go up here and also make sure I copy this colors import over to my JavaScript function. Okay, there we go. So we got a random background color, got another random color, another random color, beautiful. Okay. Now we want to move that timer down a little bit. So right now, let me see. I can probably actually just copy the CSS from here for my timer. Actually, I think this has the same CSS. What I need to do is, just for completeness' sake, I will do this. And then, yeah, what I need to do is go over to my HTML, because here I have timer and then I have class equals centered. So let's do the same thing here. Let's give this a class of centered, and then we need to copy over that style from our CSS here. Nice. It is fun to look at this. It's really fun. I know I keep saying that, but it is really fun to look at. So, one issue is I think I'm going to want to put this little audio element above most of the other stuff in my markup so that it doesn't get pushed down beyond the screen when I do this. So let me go back to my HTML here, find where did I put that audio element. Okay, it's right there. And we'll just put that at the top for the time being. Interesting. It's still getting pushed. Why is it still getting pushed out of the screen? That's a weird thing to happen. One thing that we could always do, just to cheat, is to give it a class of centered as well. So we're just going to make it absolutely positioned, and then we're going to go find that in our CSS. It's called player. Okay, I guess we don't have it in our CSS, so we will say player left 10%. Okay, now that should always stay the same. Even when we do this, this should stay here. Cool. Okay, so what are some other things that we could do in the meantime? I could also try doing a little bit of splitting JS. I might give that a shot. So I have this idea. It wasn't in the original design. The original design looks like this. But I have this idea to either make some of these or to make something here that's a little spinning 3D text element. And maybe it's going to say like, our project name, or maybe that's going to be the song name and the artist or something. I haven't really decided what it's going to say yet, but it's going to say something, and it's going to be a little 3D spinning text. Now this will be new for me too, so let's look up splitting JS. This is a library that lets you, really all it does is it splits letters into individual elements in your HTML. So if you type ABC, it'll make this little HTML structure that has like span A, span B, span C. But it gives them all these useful attributes that help to animate them. So if you go to the demos, there's a lot of really cool demos on CodePen. I guess CodePen really doesn't like if you make your browser this wide. This is, maybe I've discovered, I think, like a bug in the CSS of CodePen. I guess they don't expect people. I'm working on an ultra wide monitor, and I guess CodePen doesn't expect people to have their monitor screens like take up the entire screen. So I might have actually discovered a bug in the CSS of CodePen. But yeah, I'm trying to find this example here to show you guys, and also for my own benefit, because I'm probably going to mostly work off of this this example. Here we go. Okay, so this is the kind of thing that you can do with splitting JS rather easily. So you see up here they have this div, and it says 3D circular text. And inside of that div, they have this data splitting attribute set. And then down here in their JavaScript, all they do is just say splitting, and they call it with some arguments. And then most of the magic happens here in the CSS. So they have this outer div, which just has this transform 3D in perspective, 600 pixels. We could change this and see what happens. 100, it probably won't be as extreme of a 3D effect. Or I was wrong, it'll be a very extreme 3D effect. So if we change it to 1000, then it'll be slightly less. And if we change it to 500, it'll be a little bit more. So that's how you can change sort of the perspective of these CSS 3D transforms. And then they're doing some funny stuff down here with, this is just setting up, let's see, this is just the font size of the things, nothing actually that weird there. This is their animation, so this is telling it to spin the whole div. So this is on the entire div, circle me. And then down here is where they have their characters, and this is where the splitting part comes in. They have this distance sign, which I think is a value that's defined for each individual character. And it's like the distance of the character from the center of the screen. So like if you were to take this away and make this like, I don't know, some static value like 100, I think these will all bunch up on each other. Yeah. See, now these are all just layered on top of each other, and they're still spinning, but they're not spaced out, and that's because what we do when we say calc 160 degrees times this variable is, since it's a variable, it's giving this element, it's calculating this rotate y for each individual character. So that's what we're going to do. We're basically just going to copy this example because this example works really well. And this is sort of exactly what I want to do, except maybe I want to stack some of these on top of each other. We'll have to see. But yeah, let's give it a try. Okay, so I'm going to go back into here. I'm going to close some of these things that I don't need. I don't need my fonts. I don't need this BRB stuff anymore. Just need my files here. Okay, so I'm just going to go up to the top here, and I'm going to call splitting, give it these arguments. I'm going to say split my thing by characters. And we want to include the white space because we're doing a 3D transform. So I'm going to say white space true. If I can type, white space true. And now we have to add the element we actually want to split in here. So we add a div, and I will give this a class of 3D. And then inside that div, I will put another div that has a class of like spinning text. And very important, we need to give it the data splitting attribute so that splitting.js knows to split this up. And then let's just say we're going to call this, let's just say this is going to be like the song name and then the artist. And we'll just call it that. That's fine. Song name artist. Okay. So that's the div that we're going to split. And what I want to test, I just want to see if this is working. So just by calling splitting up here, this should have already transformed our HTML. So if we go up here and we can see there's our markup. Let's inspect it. And now we can see what splitting.js has done. So we're actually inspecting an individual character right now, but we can see that this is the whole class of 3D. This is the whole class of spinning text. And already we can see that some stuff has been added to it. So Splitting.js added some classes like words and chars and splitting, and then it added some styles, like it added this variable word count. That's how many words are in this thing, character total. And then we have a separate span for every word. So this is song. And you can see each character has this variable added to it called char index. So we can use that to animate the characters. Let me see here. And I'm a little bit confused exactly as to why they use this distance sign. I don't know what that is really. I'm trying to look in here and see if I can figure out, but I don't see the variable distance sign anywhere. So I'm gonna look that up and see if there is any documentation on it. I think it might, I mean, the other way to figure this out, what I'm going to see if I can do is go into their CSS. So they have this CSS files that they add to your project. So you can see like some of the variables we saw there, splitting, word, char, and okay, down at the bottom. Distance sign. So they say that this is the distance from the center, where -1 is the far left, 0 is the center, and 1 is the far right. Interesting. From the center of what is the question? I guess maybe distance from the center of the string. Like if you have A, B, C, it's like the distance from B, so distance sign would be 0 for the B. Maybe? The weird thing is that I can't see the distance sign attribute. I guess, actually, maybe I can see it if I inspect, if I look at each individual one and go over here to my styles panel. Yeah, it's kind of strange. So I don't know exactly where the distance sign attribute lives. We can kind of go with it for now because it seems to work in this example they give. But I do want to track down eventually where that lives on each element, because I want to understand what it's doing. So for right now, I'll just see if I can get something working, but eventually I definitely want to track that down. All right, so let's start copying and pasting a little bit here. So we have our class called "3D", I'm gonna go to my CSS here, and I'm gonna go down here and start writing these styles just because, actually I'll write them up here in case the cascade needs to take over at some point. Write them up here, this is a good place for them, okay. So we didn't call this circle me, we called this something else. We called this spinning text, okay. And I don't want it to be that color for sure. I want it to be the text color. This stuff is all fine. I really don't care about mobile. We're not dealing with mobile in this project, so. Transform style, preserve 3D, that's all good. Animation spin, that's all good. We can have this variable here, that's fine. The speed variable, animation duration, that's all good. Okay, we need to close this because they're using Sass, so we need to define our keyframes for that then. So let me put those, I have this blink animation, let's put that down here. Put these keyframes here for spin. And then we have the styles that they use for the character. Actually, let me see what this is all inside. This is all inside some parent element, which is called circle me. All right, so what we'll do I believe this is how Sass works, that we're gonna say dot circle me dot care, and this should all be fine. So this should all be fine. Rotate Y, rotate Y. This is where that distance sign thing has come in that we don't really know what it does, but it does something. All right, and let's see how we have screwed this up now. That's great. All right, so this thing is definitely spinning. It's doing something. Let's see. Part of this is that we want this to be a little bit in a different position probably so that we can see it a little bit better. So I might just move this whole div. Where did they place this spinning thing? First of all, I'm going to make this probably like oh, interesting. Okay. So why did they define font size twice? Did I miss something in their Sass? Maybe. Nope. They just defined font size twice. So I wonder what happens if we just remove this one. Probably nothing changes because that was a mistake on their part. So, okay. The letter spacing, that's whatever, we can leave that there. First we want to change this to our body font. And then position relative. We might want to change this to might want to change this to be centered. I don't know if we care about this width either. I mean, if I start changing too much, this might totally just like screw it up. So maybe I shouldn't really do this right now. Maybe I should just get it working and then I should do this. All right, now I've really made it angry. Okay, so this thing is spinning. It's spinning in a circle. It's also so big that it's preventing me from clicking on anything on the screen. So I wonder if we can just make this thing a little bit smaller. Okay. Not terrible. So this thing is currently flat and spinning about its axis, which is the issue right now. So what we're doing here is telling it to spin. So I think this div is like appropriately spinning. Wonder if this is the issue. No. Actually, maybe. So I want to do a little bit of inspecting here and see what these elements look like. So we have this 3D thing here. Wow, that looks really weird, doesn't it? Okay, so this has the class of spinning text, words, splitting. Each of these things has a class of word. And each of these things has a class of char. Now we also have to consider that there's this, there's all these white space elements kind of scattered throughout. And I want to be conscious of those as well. I don't know exactly how those fit in here. So I'm going to go back to the example now and look at what they did. So they did .circle_me. I'm just going to look this up real quick because Sass nested, or actually I'll do Sass to CSS converter just because I really don't have my Sass worked out very well. No, I would like the whole thing, please. Okay, so they have .circle_me, media, keyframes, spin, that's all good, all good, all good. They have .circle_me.char. So we'll just copy this over real quick, just to make sure that we had everything correctly copied here. Okay, so that did not work. I'm wondering if the problem is that we still have like this weird distance sign thing, which I don't really understand how it functions. I'm also going to change the perspective on this a little bit, just so that it's not so in our face. I don't know, 900. Is that still very in our face? That's still fairly in our face, but that's okay. Yeah, so I'm wondering if the problem here is that this thing down here, this distance sign thing, which I don't see where it is in any of our elements, is somehow in their elements too. One way we can check that is we could inspect this and look at what theirs looks like. So maybe theirs somehow magically has this distance sign thing on it. Word, 3D, so this is the same type of like element we would be looking at. So I'm looking for something called distance sign. Aha, okay. Interesting. Did we actually import the splitting CSS into our file? I don't know. Aha, that may be the problem. Okay. I don't think that we did. So what we need to do, of course that's the problem. Okay, so what we need to do is go back here, go to splitting. And import their CSS file. And now magically it works? No, it doesn't. Okay, so let's see. Why don't we have What's very strange is I don't see in their file. Okay, now their file does have distance sign, so why isn't it showing up when I search for it here? It's perhaps because I'm on the white space element and I wasn't selected onto one of these elements. Okay, so if I'm selected onto this element, we do have distance sign. That is a value that is in there. But still, our text is not spinning the way that we want it to. I'm just looking to make sure that my styles are matching their styles now. Okay, so I can see one issue potentially. It looks like somehow I am missing a style on this element. Ah, okay, and I realized what the answer is right now. I have incorrectly named my element. So I just remembered, of course, that the one thing I changed about this example, which is I thought it was stupid to call this circle me, so I called it spinning text. But of course, I still called this circle me. So we call this spinning text. This magically works. Aha, indeed it does. It looks a little weird though. It's like a spiral. I mean, that's actually kind of cool. But why is it a spiral? How strange. That is really cool, actually. Maybe I'll just keep it like that. I might want to make it reverse directions, though. I might want to make it go the other way. Okay, so let's see what this element has now. The issue, I believe, is in the Z transform. So if we look at our code here, this thing has translate Z, calc, char total. This translate Z should be the same, like for all these things. So I'm just gonna see what happens if I make this, like, what is this, like, I don't know, 1M? What does that do? Okay, it doesn't really change it, but it does make it constant throughout. Let's make it 10M. It's too big. All right, Goldilocks, 3M. Okay. So that wasn't the issue. I'm just going to change it back to their calc thing for the time being. What a weird issue that I'm having here. So perhaps the problem is that I've changed something up here, or that I have a different style on my body or something that they don't have. So one thing was they had their perspective at 600, so we can change it to that, which is kind of the same, to be honest. Doesn't really seem like that's going to make a big difference. Except that these things now come way out of the screen at us. I'm going to change that back. That definitely isn't the problem. In fact, I'm going to make it like 1500 or something so that it's not as crazy popping out of the screen at our faces. So let's see. What could be the different things that we have on these elements? First thing to think about is probably the body or some kind of parent element to this. So on HTML and body, they have height 100, width 100, display flex, overflow hidden. I mean, that's essentially the same thing that I have up here. I could change this to 100% instead of view width and view height. I really doubt that's the difference, but 100%, just percentages. And that won't really change anything, yeah. So it didn't change anything in our page either. Semicolon after this. Then what else could be the issue? Perhaps the positioning is an issue. So we have position relative on our body. What about theirs? They don't have a position set, but they do have display flex. I don't really want to put display flex on my HTML, so I'm going to try to avoid that for the time being. This could be an issue. This could be an issue because we have position relative set on the body. Let's take that off. Let's just see what happens if we take this off. I think it's fine to keep the margin and padding at 0. Overflow hidden. And then let's check to see. So they have this as position absolute, and they have their circle thing, which they called circle me, as position relative. And we have ours as position relative here, but we changed this to centered. I'm just gonna, did we change that to centered? No, we didn't. Okay, we left that the same. We're still getting a bizarre spiral. It really looks to me like the Z, which is really what controls like the radius of this circle. It really looks like the Z transform is somehow like linked to the data. So like to the character data, for example, the index of each character is linked to the transform Z attribute, which is like making it this weird spirally thing. But I could also just be totally off base with that. Let me take another look at my markup here and see what it looks like. So we have a word, which is the word song. We have a white space character, another word, white space, another word, white space, another word. Hmm. Well, one way we can do this is we can see if it's something in our setup versus their setup by basically just like, let's see, I should be logged in. Actually, I don't really want to do that. Let me just copy this in case I get taken away from here. Okay. So what I'm thinking is I want to just go into this CodePen and basically just change it to see if I can make it work in here using the same kind of examples or using the same kind of styles like I have in mine, and then I can see maybe if it's an issue with like something else on my page screwing it up, or if I was just having a problem in here myself. So let's see, how do I fork this? Suddenly I have forgotten how to... There should be like a very big prominent fork button here somewhere. Maybe it's just something that I'm not seeing. Okay. Down here at the bottom. Wow, what a very obscure, out of sight place to put such an important button. All right, so we've got our own version of this over here. Let me change my editor view a little bit. Let me move this over here. Let me not make this Sass. Let me make this just normal CSS, which is going to break it completely. So now I have to copy my own styles over here. I will leave their HTML, their body styles, that can all be the same. Most of these can be the same, I think. So we'll just get rid of those. And then we will copy our own 3D styles and spinning text files and all these things over here. And instead of being called Circle Me, this is called spinning text. Likewise, this one is called spinning text. Okay, interesting. So these are working. This is somehow working, even though it has these styles which shouldn't be defined here set. So I also need to copy my root over here so that they know what these variables mean. Let's see, text color, background color. Oh, I see, because they have the background color set down here. So we want the background color to just be white. Except now we can't see this one, so we'll call this one, since we're just debugging, we'll do it here. Okay. All right, so this works here. So the question is, we don't have this in ours, so actually we're just going to get rid of that one. So why doesn't it work in our case? Well, let me first of all just check that they don't have any strange settings on here. They have unpackage 1.0, 1.0 splitting.css, and they don't have anything on their HTML, on their CSS, or on their this. All they have is their splitting. Let's make sure we have the same version of them just in case, 1.0.0. whatever. We have maybe a different version actually, so I could change that. The other thing that I'm wondering is, what if we need to resize our browser? Oh, no, it doesn't seem like that's the issue. There's definitely some wonkiness going on. Between ours and theirs. Okay, so the next thing we can try doing is taking off padding 0, margin 0 from our body. Actually, we can just try copying over from the CodePen. We can copy over the body and HTML styles from here. Okay, that didn't really do the trick, so I'm just going to leave this here. I really don't think that's the issue in this case. What's the next thing that we have done differently than them? Our JavaScript is definitely the same. We did set white space true. Let me just double check that we've spelled all that correctly. In fact, I will just copy and paste that from here to make sure I haven't made a spelling mistake, since that's, like, at this point, the most likely thing that I've done. Nope, that is not making any difference. So what's the next thing that we have done wrong? And everything else in here is the same. So the only question is, this is just a div. It lives in our body. What other styles do we have here that could be messing up our stuff? Well, one thing we can try to do is move all these things up in the cascade. If this fixes it, that will be very weird, but we could just try moving all these things up to the top basically, so that we make sure that they have precedence, that they're not getting their styles overwritten by anything. Nope, that doesn't seem to be the issue. Well, at this point I am thoroughly baffled because it's very strange that this is not working in here, but we copied and pasted the exact same thing into CodePen and it magically works there. I do want to try one final thing before I call it a night, which is I want to take these styles, which are their 1.0 styles, and copy those over instead of the ones that I have right now. Because here we go. Because who knows, maybe they changed something. Nope, doesn't look like it. Okay. Well, in that case, I think it is time to call it a night. I guess I'm making a habit of ending on CSS bugs, but I'll take some time, try to figure this out. I'll try to figure out the join issue as well. But I think overall this was not a terrible day. I think this is kind of cool. I really like this kind of point drawing thing. I might just use that as something cool. So I might use that sometime actually as like just a generative art thing. It's kind of cool to see the stuff show up in a circle like that. I don't know, I never thought of changing that waveform to a circle, but yeah, thanks for tuning in, anybody that watched. I will be back at it again on Saturday night, trying to finish this up then. Hopefully I'll have that join issue figured out, and I'll have the CSS issue figured out, and we can make some text on path animations. So thanks for watching, see you next time.